What's up, folks? Welcome to another week's Red Black Wrestling Show. Since your host and Mike Marlowe on the line. Man, just we're gonna start putting the Bill Maher now. It's just for those, especially for all of our supporters, especially on Patreon. We should start sending them the bonus material, the pre-show or after show recordings.
Right.
This is like a lot of good material, man. So.
Yeah, you know you have a good guest when you talk to him or her for an hour before you start recording.
When you realize, like, wow, wait a minute, we didn't even start the show yet. A lot of good stuff, man.
Yeah, so we're going to get to him in a second. Just want to remind everyone you can support the show using that coupon code LLA. Go over to MikeMahler.com, get 10% off everything you see over there. Just remember to put that coupon code in, LLA. And how about with you, man?
Same thing. Go over to NewWarriorTraining.com, use that same coupon code, 10% off everything over there, as well as heading over to patreon.com/LLA podcast. You become a monthly supporter of the show. We truly appreciate that. And all of our Patreon supporters out there, we appreciate each and every one of you, as well as our customers who've gone to our website and purchased our products. A lot of times it's pretty much they're doing both. They're going to Patreon and they're supporting both of our websites at the same time and our products over there. So Absolutely. Thank you guys. I mean, that's really helping us with the show. We appreciate that.
Yeah, and just a few shout outs here. We've got who've been using that coupon code. We got Jordan Kramer, we got Arthur Germain, Frank Torelli, Jacob Mays, William Garcia, Miguel Perez, Tyler Mack, Benny Acosta, Nick Farina, and Jason Foster. Every time I see Benny's name, I want to yell out, Benny! You know, like that movie Total Recall where Schwarzenegger, that guy Benny, screwed him over. He takes that big drill. He's like, hey, Benny, screw you! That movie is highly quotable for all the wrong reasons, right? It's like it's highly quotable making fun of the movie, not because they're great lines like lines in the movie Heat, one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah.
So, hey, man, we got a great guest. Anyway, sorry, Sincere.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay.
Good.
So anyway, man, we've been talking to this guy for about an hour before we started recording today. Huge fan of his work. He wrote for Ironman magazine for many years, thousands of articles out there, legit experts. One thing about our show is we're not bringing in flavor of the month experts that are YouTube sensations. We're bringing in well-established experts with great information. And Jerry Brainum is no exception. He's an incredible resource, and his website is appliedmetabolics.com. So make sure you go check it out. I'm actually a subscriber to his newsletter, and I rarely ever subscribe to anything because, as we all know, most of the time you're paying for garbage that you can find anywhere on the internet for free. But with Jerry's stuff, it's only $10 a month. There's so much information on there, you would spend years going through all of it. The last thing you're going to complain about is lack of information on there. In fact, Jerry was saying that people are saying it's overwhelming. There's so much good information on there. How am I going to get through this? But that's what you want to see when you're paying for information. The last thing you want is paying $10 a month and then you go through everything that's on there in a couple of weeks. Why do you keep paying it? So anyway, we'll talk to him about that and supplements and a variety of things. Jerry, how you doing today, man?
How are you, Mike?
Doing great. We feel like we've known each other for a long time after that hour discussion we had before recording today.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was great.
Well, hey, man, I wanted to start the discussion, and we'll just go off on whatever tangent comes up with different supplement categories. Okay. And one I'm really fascinated by is nootropics. And I know you have a great YouTube clip on this, and you have great information on your website as well. But I'm curious what nootropics you think are effective, and we can talk about over-the-counter and even prescription ones too.
Okay, well, it depends on the nootropics. There's like different categories of them.
Right.
There are some that, for example, supposedly stimulate memory and learning, and there are others that kind of like sharpen your thinking abilities, cognitive abilities.
Right.
In the latter category, as far as cognitive abilities, I would say probably the king is modafinil.
Yeah.
That's very popular among supposedly stockbrokers and and people that kind of need to think on their feet. Some people add in Adderall.
Have you ever used modafinil, Jerry?
Actually, it's funny that you say that because when I did the research years, for that video, I researched just to get up to date. I looked at the latest research, and I came across some fairly good stuff on modafinil, and I got a prescription for it. And I said, well, you know what? This is going to help my writing because sometimes I'll write for hours and hours, and it's hard to maintain a focus.
Yeah.
If you've been writing for like 6 hours or more. It's tough, No doubt. I said, based on what I read, this stuff's going to be really useful for me. So I bought this bottle, and I'll cut to the chase. I've never opened it. I mean, it's still sitting on my desk. Why? Because I came across a subsequent report, and this might interest you. This relates to the so-called brain sharpening stuff like modafinil and Adderall. Get this, guys. This is going to shock you. If your brain is already operating on maximum efficiency and your creativity is high and you take this stuff, it actually can mess you up where you start to sputter like a car on bad gas. You know what I mean? In other words, it works best if you're having trouble focusing and concentrating, or if you're what they call a low-level thinker, which is a kind of politically correct term of saying that you're an idiot. In other words, if you're kind of on the dumb side and, you have trouble putting things together, if you take something like modafinil, it will actually make you a little bit more aware, where it makes you more cognizant, able to learn things a little bit better. I shouldn't call him an idiot. Let's say you're not really thinking maximally. Let me rephrase that.
Yeah, I must be pretty dumb because I've gotten pretty good results.
Yeah, same here.
No, I was
in the right moment. This is one of my dumb phases.
Well, no. I should have used the word dumb because.
No, it's fine, man. I'm fine. I'm just joking.
What I meant to say was, that was an impulsive remark on my part.
No, it's funny, man.
I respect that, but
it's not. It wasn't like that movie with Bradley Cooper, Limitless. Yeah, it wasn't like that. But I've taken it. I've taken it before. I've taught courses where, especially overseas, where I'm jet lagged and my sleep the night before is not that great. And what I find is I'm just really sharp. Economy of language. I'm not blabbering on, less words to get to my point, and then just recall and delivery is way faster. And I've used it before writing as well, and it really allowed me to stay in the zone and finish wherever I'm working on. I use it extremely infrequently. Yeah. I got a prescription as well, and I think I got 30 tablets in. That was years ago, and I still have most of them. So it's not something I would use every day. And I think if you did use it for, let's say, a couple weeks straight, I think, there would be some negatives for sure when you go off.
Well, you hit the nail right on the head, the proverbial nail on the head, because that's exactly what it's good for. If you're under conditions such as jet lag or not enough sleep, where you're basically not mentally 100%, modafinil could be a great asset.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
But I mean, if, for example, everything's cool, you had enough sleep and your brain is at maximum efficiency, there's a danger that it's almost like adding a fuel mixture to a already optimal fuel mixture, adding another source of fuel that would kind of interfere with the performance of the first fuel mixture.
Right.
That's the way modafinil could work with some people. That's the danger involved. And the second part is also, you kind of touched on that, is no one knows what happens when you use this consistently all the time.
Right.
And I think Sincere just pointed out, which I agree with, there's something in when you're dealing with pharmaceuticals called tachyphylaxis, which means there's a certain point where the drug just doesn't work after a while, or it doesn't work as well.
Right.
This even happens. It's well known. Any bodybuilder or powerlifter will tell you that, steroids always work the best the first time you use them.
Right.
As you continue to use them, it's not that they don't work, but the effect is not as dramatic as the years go by.
Right.
And in some cases, I've actually come across a couple of pro bodybuilders where the drugs didn't work at all. They didn't harden up like they used to. They didn't get the look they used to. It's not that their drugs weren't working. Their body just wasn't reacting to it the same way. And
just androgen receptors were just worn out. Yeah, they're not picking it up.
There's a number of reasons why, but the point is that this can happen with just about any drug. It probably happens with modafinil. Now the other category.
Seems like it happens with everything, right? If you do the same workout for too long, you get diminished returns.
Right.
You do the same. Yeah, you do the same routine of anything.
And you're not going to. Reaction is just like what Jerry was talking about with the steroids. Like, what do they do instead of realizing, it's never as good as the first time. What do they do? Let me double up. Let me do more. Let me not cycle off. It's kind of like a drug user. It's like a cocaine user. Like, I'm pretty sure, I've never done coke, but I'm pretty sure the second high is never like the first. And they're constantly spend years trying to recreate that first time they ever got high off coke. And they'll never, it's just kind of like relationships. A bad relationship is like, we keep going back to each other, because, that's all I know. But dude, it's never going to be as good as the first time. You broke up for a reason. Okay. So Or
Sincere always brings up relationship analogies.
Because you know why? Most of my listeners can relate to that. Like, okay, I get that. I understand.
It's kind of like that first chick you had sex with,
No, but actually, it's a valid analogy he's bringing up. I totally agree with that, because that's the way. Again, that's the way most drugs are. I mean, there's a wearing off process, and as you point out, see, the body always tries to maintain what they call homeostasis.
Right.
In other words, it adopts to something, and after a while, nothing happens. And the only way you're going to change something, you literally have to change something, or you have to prod it. In the sense of working out, you have to change your workout, change the style of training, change the intensity level. If you do the same thing all the time, we all know this. If you do the same exercise, the same reps, the same weight, nothing's going to change. You might be able to maintain what you have, but as far as gains, nothing's going to happen unless you prod your body. And as Sincere just pointed out, the steroid users make the mistake of thinking, well, if I'm taking 3 drugs and I'm taking so-and-so milligrams, if I triple the milligram amount and I add 3 extra drugs, I should get twice as big. But that's not the way the body works. There's a limit to how much the body, all you're doing there is increasing the chances of serious side effects. Yeah. It's like shooting yourself in the foot. You're not going to make yourself any bigger, but you're greatly, greatly increasing the risk of serious health issues.
I think you have to have a lot of discipline with something like modafinil. It's not something I would recommend to most people, especially people with addictive personalities, because it will allow you to not improve your lifestyle and rely on it.
And
so instead of improving your nutrition, your sleep, and so forth, you're going, man, I can just sleep 3 hours a night and have a crappy diet and pop one of these and still be productive.
That's a very good. Well, the drug is actually used to treat something called narcolepsy.
Yeah, that's right, narcolepsy.
Exactly. Which is basically where you just fall asleep. You could be driving a car and suddenly you nod off and you crash.
Right.
This is, and it was also developed. There was a side reason for it. It was actually also partially developed for the military. They want, for example, jet pilots. Pilots. They wanted to keep them awake and maximum alertness. Obviously, it's important for them. And Mike, you hit a perfect point, which is, if you're going to use it, have the discipline to use it very selectively. Yes, the drug is very effective for the purposes that you discussed. When your mind's a little bit off, when you haven't had enough sleep, when you're suffering jet lag or whatever, that's when you use it. Don't take it like a vitamin routinely every day. Don't take it to wake you up in the morning. Stick with coffee. Caffeine you can do that with. Modafinil you can't. That's the bottom line. And like I say, it does work. But, getting back to this thing, the other categories would be the learning and memory stuff. Now, I should point out that you got to separate them, because modafinil and Adderall, they're brain stimulants. They're not really learning tools and memory tools. They're to sharpen your brain, make you more alert. So that, a lot of people think that they're going to make you smarter, like that movie. What's that movie you mentioned?
Limitless.
I almost called it Clueless, but that was same thing. That would be a Freudian slip. The thing is, I mean, a lot of people, hear about the stockbroker, and some of these people making a lot of money, relying on modafinil or whatever, and they think, well, that's why they're making so much money, because this stuff is making them so sharp, so intelligent, and they see that movie and they think that it's real life.
Right.
Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that.
No.
It will make a sharp person sharper if the need arises. Like if the person is a little bit off, like I say, it'll make you it'll maximize your thinking ability for that amount of time, but it's not going to make a person who's not sharp into a genius. That's where the misconception comes in.
No doubt.
The other drugs, the so-called cognitive enhancers, those drugs are touted to actually increase memory intelligence. The question is, do they really do this? A couple of names now. The racetams are a perfect example. You've heard of paracetam?
Oh, yeah.
You've heard of some of these drugs?
Yeah, I've used all those racetams at one point or another. Yeah.
Now, paracetam was the original smart drug that dates back to the early '60s, I believe. In fact, the word nootropic was developed based on paracetam. The nootropic basically means the development of new neurons,
right?
Which is that right there is a misnomer, because if you apply the word nootropic to these drugs, you're implying that they will develop new neurons in the brain, but they don't work like that.
Right.
In other words, again, what they're doing is working within your own brain mechanisms to maximize what's already there, and that's there's a kind of like carryover with the other drugs, the stimulants, in the sense that let's say certain neurotransmitters of your brain are not working at maximum efficiency. Some of them do relate to intelligence. For example, dopamine and norepinephrine stimulate parts of your brain that have to do with mental drive and learning. And then you have acetylcholine, which is in the hippocampus. That's the part of the brain considered the seat of learning and memory. If you're low in any of these neurotransmitters, for some reason or other, and you take, let's say, paracetam or other nootropics that stimulate the increase of these particular neurotransmitters, you're going to get an effect. On the other hand, if your neurotransmitters are already balanced, which is the way they are in most people, because your brain is acutely sensitive to this stuff. It can sense when a neurotransmitter is low, and it tries to do things to constantly balance it out. Otherwise, we'd all slip into mental illness very rapidly. So your brain is very good. It's almost like, it is a computer. It's like a natural computer. It knows how to self-balance. But there are occasions, again, it could be due to poor diet, lack of sleep, overtraining, whatever, stress, where you could temporarily throw these things out of balance. If you take something like paracetam or one of the nootropics, some of the nootropics have less edge than others. In other words, they have less chance of side effects is the best way to put it. It will balance it out. And again, you will find that your thinking might be a little bit clearer. And if you are involved in some intensive learning activity, for example, if you're a student trying to cram for a test, or you're studying research like I do, where you have to memorize a lot of stuff, or if you're an actor learning lines, it will probably make a difference in that situation. But now let's look at it from the other point of view of the abnormal brain. Let's say you're in the early stages of a cognitive deficit, what they call minimum cognitive disorder, which affects a lot of people over 40. This is what they call the senior moments, where you have these memory lapses, right? In that situation, there's it's not that you're having brain damage, but basically your brain is aging. That's all it means. It doesn't mean you're going to get Alzheimer's or any kind of dementia. Now, if you give, and this is what they've shown in studies, if you supply these nootropics like paracetam, the racetam, if you give them to somebody with that, it only works about 20% of the time. Nobody knows why, but it doesn't work 80%. It does absolutely nothing for. If you give those drugs, again, you look at full-fledged dementia, where there's a complete block of learning and memory, a complete deficit. If you give these drugs to somebody who already has, let's say, stage 2 Alzheimer's, they don't do anything at all. Nothing. Absolutely. So in other words, if the brain structures that produce neurotransmitters are already damaged, it's like, trying to, knock on the door where you're not getting any answer with straw. That's the best way to put it. So again, it depends on the situation. I would, categorize nootropics as situational. So it's depending on the situation, they could be very useful. One of these days, I'm going to try modafinil. I haven't done it yet, quite honestly, but I'm going to wait until exactly what you pointed out, Mike. If I'm
Well, I do like it because it doesn't affect sleep negatively either. Right. So you could pop one in the afternoon, get whatever you need to get done, and you're not going to be all wired at night the way you would be if you had too much caffeine, for example.
Right. Well, there's an antidote to that we can talk about in a minute as far as the caffeine goes.
Would that be theanine for caffeine?
Yeah, hit it right to the head. I was just going to slip into it. But I think I pointed it out in my video when I did the video on nootropics.
Yeah.
One of the best natural nootropics, and this has been shown in actual studies, is a combination of caffeine and theanine. It actually works. It works for just about anyone. Now, here's the thing. We all know, it's no secret that caffeine's a brain stimulant, right? Now, the problem with caffeine is that in a certain number of people, it overstimulates, where they get jitters and all this kind of stuff. And when you get overstimulated, instead of thinking clearly, your brain starts to skip. You can't focus.
Right.
So you need something that's going to balance the caffeine. This is where theanine comes in. Theanine, for those that don't know, is a natural amino acid. L-theanine is the full name. It's found naturally in tea, mainly it's in green tea and black tea, but it's mainly found in tea. It's found in a couple other things, but it has this unique effect in the brain. It stimulates what they call brain alpha waves. Now, what does this mean? The alpha waves are measured on what they call an electroencephalograph that measures brain waves. What are alpha waves? Alpha waves are associated with calm thinking. Basically, you're relaxed. But here's the key. It's not like a drug where it's going to relax you and kind of knock you out and make you stupid. In other words, it doesn't work like that. All it does is kind of relax you, and in doing so, it kind of opens the door for clearer thinking. Theanine itself, without the caffeine, has been shown in studies done in Japan to actually increase intelligence by itself because of the way it kind of calms the brain down and makes the brain work more efficiently. However, if you combine it with caffeine, you're getting the benefit of both substances. And in addition, the theanine is taking the edge off the caffeine. So now you're getting all the brain stimulation effects of the caffeine without any of the edge. And I've recommended this combination to guys that want to use caffeine for, let's say, mental alertness, but they have problems with caffeine. When I told them to add the theanine, so far the feedback has been about 99% positive, where they told me it worked.
About 100 milligrams, 200 milligrams? What do you think is the right dose?
Exactly, 1 to 200 milligrams of theanine. And if you're using the caffeine for mental alertness purposes, you probably want to go with about 300 to 400 milligrams minimal for thinking purposes, which would be
Could you just drink green tea or black tea since that already has theanine in it? Or is it not enough theanine?
Actually, you'd have to drink quite a few cups of that stuff, and then you get into.
And then you get the caffeine, more caffeine. So,
right.
So the ratio is not.
It's not just the caffeine, but large amounts of green tea actually interfere with thyroid function, and so you don't want to take in massive amounts.
What would be considered large amounts?
It would be 10 cups or more.
Okay, that's a lot. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm drinking one or two.
I'm not major over here.
And also, and another problem with taking large amounts of green tea, whether it's in capsule or in actual green tea liquid, is the fact that if you look at the main ingredient, the active ingredient, it's a polyphenol. It's classified called EGCG, and it's very potent. But there's a weird effect in a certain number of people. It doesn't happen in everybody. It has a reverse effect in the liver. It actually turns into what they call a pro-oxidant instead of an anti. See, normally EGCG is a very potent antioxidant. It does a number of things. I mean, green tea, I can do a whole show on just green tea. I won't go into it. But let me put it this way. In some people, for some unknown reason, it has to do with some sort of gene mutation. When they take in even normal amounts of green, let's say green tea capsules, it acts as a pro-oxidant in the liver, and it can cause liver damage to the point where some people have had to have a liver transplant.
Wow.
So the problem, and this is to me is kind of a big problem, is you don't know you're one of those people until it happens.
This is a problem with the capsules, or could this happen with just drinking green tea?
Mainly with the capsules.
So it has to be concentrated amounts of that.
Exactly. You hit it right on the head. It has to be it kind of reminds me, you guys remember a basketball player I think his name was Len Bias. You remember Len Bias? Now,
that is my go-to for never doing drugs and never doing coke. Since 1988, 89 in high school, I was like, that is my go-to. That's my just say no campaign.
From Different Strokes.
Sincere, you obviously know the story, but let me repeat it for those that don't know. Since this guy Len was a great basketball player, tremendous potential, he was sitting around with a group of friends and they were doing some coke. No problem. They were snorting it. They weren't doing crack. They weren't injecting it. Everything was going fine. 2 hours later, I think it was about 2.5 hours later, Len Bias died. I mean, his heart stopped. Yep. It turns out what they found out was that Len Bias had this rare genetic defect where there was a certain enzyme in the liver that normally breaks down cocaine. He, because of a genetic defect, lacked this enzyme. So as he continued to snort the cocaine, it built up after about 2 hours to an amount toxic enough to turn off his heart. Young man in otherwise fantastic shape died. Yep. And this is the scary thing about some things. And you know, in my articles, I've also implied that this can happen with steroids. In other words, I'm not going to go into one of these things about steroids is going to kill you. I mean, we all know this. God knows how many people, even the pro bodybuilders, have taken massive amounts of steroids. None of them are dropping out like flies yet. Right. If you look at the medical journals like I do all the time, you do find occasional case studies of young men in otherwise tremendous health, in great shape, who had complications. It wasn't a direct cause and effect, but the steroids were implicated in their deaths. And nobody really knows why. Like for some of them, for example, had heart attacks. Some of them had strokes. And, the doctors who wrote this up said, well, we can't say it's directly because of the steroids, but we found no other risk factors, so the steroids must be involved. That's the way they usually end the reports. Right. The way I interpret that is these guys that were affected that badly by steroids had genetic defects that they were not aware of, which the steroids basically turned on and proved fatal in their case. To me, in my mind, that is the most dangerous aspect of steroids or growth. For example, growth hormone. Growth hormone stimulates another hormone called insulin-like growth factor 1. Yeah. Insulin-like growth factor 1 stimulates mitosis. That's a fancy word for cell division. What is cancer? Cancer is uncontrolled cell division. Let's say you have a tumor in your body that's on the brink of becoming cancerous, but is still localized, what they call in situ. There's a danger if you take large amounts of growth hormone, which will stimulate IGF-1, the IGF-1 will actually turn that benign tumor into a malignant tumor. It's an outside chance, admittedly, but there's always the chance. Yeah. It does happen in certain people. Very rarely, I admit, very rarely. But this, to me, is the biggest danger of these drugs. Not the other stuff about the heart disease, all that. That stuff is all possible with high dosages, don't get me wrong. But I'm saying the biggest danger is you don't know that you're that statistical improbability person where taking these drugs is going to lead you right to a grave.
It's hard to do any preemptive measures for any of that as well,
there
right?
Isn't.
So you can't take growth hormone and then get a test in a couple of weeks to see if anything's going awry.
Right. No, because there's no, like I say, you have no prior symptoms. I mean, before you took there's nothing. Unless you underwent like intense genetic testing, there's no way you'd know. And no doctor is going to order that. If you go to a doctor's office, well, most doctors, unless it's an anti-aging, they're not going to give you growth hormone anyway. But if you go to a doctor's office, hey, listen, doc, I'm interested in taking some growth hormone. And I read Brainum's article. He said something about IGF-1. It's cancer. I'd like you to test my genes to make sure that I don't have this problem. He's going to say, get the fuck out, at my office. Don't waste my time. That's what you're stuck. Well, he might not say that particular.
They question you like, why are you worrying about that?
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard that question before. Like, well, why do you care about that? I mean, you're so young. Exactly. I'm like, okay, I don't want to wait till I'm old and I'm starting to feel depleted or whatever, and then start questioning you. By then, it's almost a little too late. I want to do preemptive measures. Is that the whole purpose of coming to you, doc, for preemptive measures?
Well, the anti-aging doctors, to be fair, are going to be more open-minded than your general practitioner would be. So the guy you're talking about, Jerry, someone who goes to get growth hormone from an anti-aging doctor, they're going to tend to be at least more up-to-date on research that's out there.
Exactly.
So my guess is they probably wouldn't push back that much on any test that you would want to have, especially if it makes you feel safer about using something. It's a general practitioner that would push back on anything you want.
That name alone says it all. General practitioner. It's like
I would definitely agree with that. Plus, I mean, I hate to be cynical. The added tests also mean added income for the anti-aging doctor too. We have to, but besides
that, you're going to encourage it.
Exactly.
Let's do all these tests just to make sure.
Exactly.
And the general practitioner hasn't got hip to it yet to see how he can make money off of it. It's like, no, let me just give you some. How about some I don't know, some high blood pressure pills? How about some stuff for your cholesterol? I've got those drugs available.
Right. But see, the thing is, this is the problem with older people. Now, the growth hormone therapy that they give to for anti-aging purposes, that's extremely low dosage. That's like something like 1/10 the dose they give for a growth hormone deficiency. Right. But even there, if you check the medical journals, the concern is, again, related to that IGF factor. There's a lot of doctors, and a lot of these doctors are endocrinologists, hormone specialists, who voice concern that what's going to happen 10 years down the line. Are these people going to open up a dormant tumor and die of cancer? My answer to that is we will kind of make you guys laugh, is a lot of the people that start growth hormone are already like in their late 60s. They're going to die anyway.
Right.
I don't think they really give a shit.
Just a matter of time.
If they think that the growth hormone is going to make them look and feel better, fuck the tumors.
There's an argument for that, right? I mean, if you're already at a certain age and you're thinking, I'd rather have 20 years where I feel great as opposed to 30 where the last 10 are terrible. Yeah, that's a trade-off each person has to make.
Exactly. When you spend most of your day taking just a lot of random medication, for all these different ailments or whatever else, whereas, that's not living. When you sit and you got like a box and you have to go through all these different compartments of pills, you got to pop 20 or 30 at a time. That's not living. So why not?
Yeah, you don't get an award for being the oldest person ever. I'd rather have like 50 years of a life that's incredible than 80 where you're just miserable the whole time.
Well, it reminds me of a story that Bruce, remember Bruce Lee, the great martial artist? He was being interviewed at a outdoor cafe in Paris once, and as he's being interviewed, him and the reporter watch this old man cross the street. And the guy was all bent over and taking short steps, typical real frail old man. And Bruce Lee just stared at the guy, didn't say anything. About 5 minutes went by, and Bruce Lee turns to the reporter and he says, I'd rather be dead than live like that. Life is not worth living.
Well, I have that same line of thinking, but now it's with guys of any age with bitch tits and an ass like a woman. When I see them walk by, I go, you know what? I'd rather die than look like that guy.
Well, yeah. I understand that.
No, but I actually have a very healthy or unhealthy fear, I should say, of being old. So I can relate to Bruce Lee. I'm that guy who does that. I see like some old dude, old bent over, walking around. I'm like, God damn, that's scary.
In fact, I get that fear the older I get. I'm like, fuck that.
Well, listen, I'm the head of both you guys, so imagine how I feel. Think about it. I remember the first time I was at covering a bodybuilding contest. I was at the Caesars Palace Hotel in Las Vegas. This is about 30 years ago or whatever. And I remember the mirrors in the bathroom in the hotel room. It had those, round, those 360-degree mirrors. And I was kind of like shaving.
Showing too much, man.
Look at my back fat.
Yeah, exactly. I look at the mirror, and at first I thought it was like a stain on the mirror. I'm thinking, what the fuck is that?
You're like, is that my ass too?
No. I had this bright light above my head, right? And I'm looking, I'm thinking, what the hell? And I put my hand, and I swear I didn't feel anything, but I'm showing like a bald patch. I didn't know that I was losing my hair in the back. And I remember I was still pretty young back then. And I got to tell you guys, I unabashed, I admit it, I sat on the bed and started crying. I said, fuck, I'm old already. I'm old. Yeah. I admit it was irrational in retrospect.
Sure.
But I just hit me. I had no idea. And, I'm just illustrating the way I feel. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of like, understanding what you guys say. I mean, it's whenever I read about a celebrity that died,
it's just when you're used to being strong and fit,
Yeah.
right?
And, especially during that time, it's all about being the guy, you're young and you've got all this, especially like in the 80s, these guys have this big, massive hair because it's just a sign of being young and, virile and whatever else. And the only guy that pretty much was getting all the ladies back then that was bald was Telly Savalas. So it wasn't much to look for. And that's Kojak for people that need to Google that. So it really didn't give you much hope,
No. As a matter of fact, I was just talking about that the other day to a guy in the gym. I was pointing out how, I remember a time when like you were saying, Sincere, I remember a time back in the 70s, 60s, whatever, when if a guy lost one strand of hair, he'd start to like freak out. Now contrast this with today, where every other guy, white, black, whatever, is walking around with bald heads. Yeah. And here's the deal. It's totally accepted. Nobody thinks
that's because
twice.
You go where the women go. The women are like, ooh, I love your bald head. And after that, guys start shaving. They weren't trying to hold on to the stubble and the receding hairlines. They shave that crap off. And then you start having all these companies coming out with Dollar Shave Club, and then you start having, these blades that they have just for bald heads that you can shave.
Head scalp or whatever they call that thing.
So
head blade.
Hey man.
And think back to those days. What did the guys have? Remember the rock star that had hair down to the fucking waist?
Yeah, their hair was longer than the girls at the time.
I mean, if you walked around with short hair, women wouldn't even look at you.
They probably thought you were like a serial killer or a pedophile. It's like, what's wrong with this guy? He probably had the porn stash and no beard or anything like that.
There you go. So
the more feminine you look, the better. It's just like, clean face, long hair. Some guys wearing eyeliner and everything else. Like, oh yeah, those guys are getting all the chicks. Then this guy is looking with a mustache and, he's going bald or whatever. Like, okay, what's up with Uncle Creepy over there?
You know what? I still think there's a certain percentage of the female population that still likes guys that kind of are feminine looking. that maybe we're a little,
a pretty high percentage.
Yeah, that's a high percentage. There's no thinking that's going on. I mean,
just
in our school system,
that explains skinny jeans.
Yeah, I mean, there's dudes walking around with skinny pajamas, like for pants on, these jogging pants, pajama things, that gather at the ankles. I'm like, dude, are you serious right now? Like, what is going on with these now? These guys, they're wearing these these high crotch pants to the point where you can't have a penis and wear those pants. It's just not fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you walk around like a Ken doll. And Ken didn't have a penis.
I just put something on Facebook. It was a research study where it basically kind of said something which I think most people realize is that men and women have different psychological orientations towards sex. And the bottom line is that women are more oriented to kind of accepting having sexual fantasies and relations with other women. In other words, Freud said this many years ago. He believes that all women are naturally bisexual and that, they kind of go against the grain almost when they go totally monogamous with men. But the purpose of that, of course, is to procreate and produce children. But, when you think about it,
society,
this kind of neatly explains this attraction that many women have to guys that look really kind of feminine. I mean,
honestly, I'm surprised women are attracted to men at all. So the fact that women are attracted to other women, that doesn't surprise me because we're all attracted.
I mean, a lot of times you hear from so many women who are lesbian, they'll say like, well, no one knows how to treat me and please me like another woman. And and a lot of times guys won't get it because guys don't have the same parts. They don't have the same feelings. A lot of times, guys are so visual for the most part, whereas women are a lot more, when it comes to sexual, a lot more mental. Guys, we just, like I said, we can just see anybody walk by and just like, she has a vagina, I'm attracted. I'm good.
That's it.
If she's giving me attention and she has a vagina, then I'm all in. Women are like, nah, I'm going to need a little more substance, dude. It's like, let me know. Can you think? I mean, what are you about? And guys are like, what, huh? And like I said, this is not everybody, but for the most part, that's been this thing. It's just like you have these two different aspects when it comes to what attracts them sexually and how they see, relationships, because there's just this whole, it goes back to the caveman days. What were men doing? It's like, okay, I'm going to go out and get dinner. I'm going to hunt, gather, whatever else. Come back. By the time I'm coming back, I'm hungry. I'm tired. But at the same time, you've been doing all this stuff out in the woods where you're chasing and whatever else. And like, dude, you're amped up. You got to do something with that adrenaline. And there's your woman, there it is, so all that, you got that rise. But then after that, you start your next day, you do it all over again while she's been home and, she's been kind of just waiting and she's not going out there killing dinosaurs or whatever else. She's like, screw that. I'll stay here, with the kids and just stay here where it's nice and safe. You can have all that. And it's a little bit more nurturing. To the fact. So that takes to nurture someone takes a lot of mental skills, so and for the most part in the beginning of time, we were removed from that because we were out pretty much on our own doing our own thing. And people can say, oh, that's just, sexist, whatever. It's like, no, that's history. Go read it. Okay. So don't even start any feminazis, which I doubt we have anymore at this point, so don't even try to come back with that mess. Just if you actually just, use common sense, you will see like, yeah, I can see that. Doesn't mean that just because that happened before, we have to still be that way. But at the same time, again, we're talking about what kind of leads to this kind of thinking, between men and women, especially when it comes to sexuality. So.
Exactly. But, related to that statement you made about how lesbians say that only a woman can know another woman's body, that is generally true. And but the reason for that is that most men, I would say the majority of men, don't bother to learn about it.
Like they don't ask. It's like, oh, I'm just getting mine out.
And they impart their values on women's psychology, which is always a mistake. Right. In other words, they're hot to trot. They want to get laid. So they just want to jump on the woman and start pumping away. They don't realize that the woman needs warming up. She needs a foreplay. She needs she needs her whole body stimulated. The guys that bother to learn this stuff or ask, like you say, they're the ones that women talk about as being this fantastic lover type of situation. Right. See, the other guys are just bumblers.
But those guys are also, they know they have a limited amount of time. You're like, okay, this erection is only going to stay without a blue pill. I'm only going to have this erection for so long. And you don't want to be that guy that by the time she's warmed up and ready to go, you can't get it up because now you got to sit there and wait. And then there's a whole new issue because now she's thinking like, what, you're not attracted to me? Or she's thinking like, God, this guy sucks. And then he's thinking that too. He's like, I don't want to suck, and I don't want to, I don't want her thinking that, it's her, but then he doesn't want to admit that because it makes him, for some reason, he feels like that makes him feel weak and look weak to her. And so there's this whole different set of like psychological mess going on just from that situation. So they're like, let me get this while I got it up, and then of course, nature is a funny being because it's like, well, she can sit there and get hers 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times in one session. Dude, you're lucky if you get yours maybe 2 or 3 times in one session before you're like, I'm tired. And a lot of times women are tired too, like, get off me. By the time you get to the second one, like, enough. So don't go by the porn and all this other crap or whatever. Most women by 30 minutes, they want you to go away. They want you to stop.
That's true. That's true. But I have one word for the guy that's having trouble with the, Viagra. I mean, if you think that's going to happen, use one of those, phosphodiesterase. I mean, it'll keep you up for a while. If you think you're going to encounter something like that,
There's a problem when you're 25 years old and you're popping Viagra at 25. Yeah, I'm like, dude, you're at the height of your testosterone.
Well, at that age, it's not about ED, it's about performance enhancement.
Exactly.
Right? It's like someone taking a pre-workout supplement.
Yeah.
It's just a quick fix, which is what our society is all about.
Yeah.
So taking a pre-workout supplement is for that as well. Like, I don't feel like working out. Let me take this so I'll feel like working out. Where if you had a good night of sleep and your nutrition is optimal, you're going to feel like working out without needing a kick.
Right.
But going back to this nootropics, we went on this round the world discussion as we always do. So that's not surprising to listeners. Just coming back to nootropics, on one of your videos, you talked about ginkgo biloba, vinpocetine, and bacopa and phosphatidylserine.
Right.
And you said that there's a lot of benefits of these, but it takes several months for these to kick in. It's not something where you're going to feel it in the first week or two.
That's correct. In other words, if you were to say to me, if you give me a blanket question, what would you recommend for mental enhancement that you use on a regular basis? I would recommend the nutritional versions rather than the modafinil and the paracetam, that kind of stuff. That is situational. Right. Rather, you could say they're used for under acute conditions when you really need that boost, whereas the other ones will kind of continually feed your brain more or less. These substances that you mentioned, most of them are safe, but being that the one thing you'll find, Mike, with natural substances is that they don't work like drugs. Drugs.
It's going to be subtle. Yeah.
Right. A lot of drugs work by interacting with enzymes. That's a more or less rapid, almost instantaneous type of situation. Whereas kind of natural substances have to kind of like get incorporated in the body. One good example of this is like the joint supplements like glucosamine. I mean, those things take 2 to 3 months before they do anything.
Right.
And some of the studies that found that they didn't work, they gave it to them for 2 weeks. Of course it's not going to work.
Right.
It's to be actually incorporated in the joint. And that's the same with these natural nootropics, if you want to call them that, like the ones you mentioned, bacopa, all that, ginkgo. I mean, they take a while. A good example, when I first started using ginkgo years ago, I was writing back then, and I was looking for something. I had a maximum writing time of about 2 hours back, meaning that it's like we were just saying about the sex. After 2 hours, I just burnt out. I just couldn't think. I started making spelling errors. I couldn't put the sentences together. I knew I had to stop.
Yeah.
So I heard about ginkgo. It supposedly increased your focus, your mental ability, your concentration. I said, okay, I'm going to try this stuff. And I took it and I actually doubled the dosage initially. I was taking 240 milligrams. The suggested dosage is 120. I started right off at 240. And I took it, 2 weeks went by, nothing. 3 weeks, nothing. 4 weeks, and I'm saying, okay, this stuff's a fraud. Doesn't work. I'm still on my 2 hour limit. I remember about 2 months, but I continued to take it because it wasn't that much money. I figured, it's not hurting me. And it did something else which was useful to me. It inhibited a certain protein that's related to asthma attacks. And since I have asthma, I figured, okay, I'll take it for the asthma. So I continued to take it. I remember this is how it happened. I was about 2 months later. I was working on an article, and I got into what they call a flow. You know what that is?
Sure.
You're writing, you kind of lose complete track of time. It's almost like you're enveloped, and it's just you and the. At that time, I was using a typewriter. That's how long ago it was. There was no computer, and it was just me and the typewriter. The world had disappeared, and I remember I'm typing, and I'm going, and everything's going great. and I lost track of time. And then finally I kind of like came out of it. I look at the clock, 12 hours had gone by. 12 hours had gone by. Mm-hmm. I said, holy shit, the stuff finally kicked in. So my point is, it took 2 months for it to really, and after that, I mean, I still take it. I don't know if it works like that anymore, but right now I'm taking so many. I tell people that about 30% of the supplements I take are to stimulate memory and learning and to sharpen my brain. Believe it. Yeah. That gives you an idea of how much I believe in this stuff. I mean, if a scientist was sitting in on this interview, these people, these neuroscientists, he'd actually start laughing and he'd say, Jerry, you're obviously displaying the placebo effect because there's no real research to show that this stuff is really doing what you think it's doing. And my response to that is, you know what, doctor? I am able to write as long as I want. I can focus. I can concentrate. I don't have trouble reaching for words, which a lot of people my age do. I said, so if it's it's like they say about the bodybuilding supplements. Oh, it's a placebo. The whey protein's not really doing anything. In the meantime, the guy's putting on muscle. So, obviously something is causing his muscle to grow. Maybe he's training harder. Maybe he's sleeping better. But, if he thinks it's the whey and he's gaining muscle, do you really give a crap that it's a placebo if you're actually making real gains? Then that's my point. If this stuff if I believe that it's making me smarter and my work and my thinking seems to indicate that, I'm going to continue taking them. That's it. All right, maybe I am wasting my money. I don't know. But the point is that most of these things do have some basis. I don't take anything that has no basis of research.
Well, I guess the way to know for sure would be you stop taking it for a while.
Exactly. And on top of that, is it really placebo if it's giving you that belief that it's working and you're actually achieving the goal in which that you're taking these products, then is it really not working when you say it that way? Sometimes things got to go a little beyond just the science of it or whatever, because science is still having a problem trying to break down belief and really understand belief and faith or whatever else. So again, if it's in your mind helping you to get to where you need to be, then is it really not working at that time? Or
in your case, I don't really think it's a placebo anyway, because for the first several months you said, I'm not feeling anything off of this. The stuff's not doing jack shit. And then all of a sudden it started working. So you didn't even have the belief that it's actually beneficial on that.
I did not have the belief. And at that time, that was the only so-called nootropic supplement I was using. I wasn't using any of the others. It was only ginkgo. The only other things I used were my normal vitamins, which I've been taking for years. Your classic vitamin mineral. I wasn't taking anything that would stimulate the brain. And so again, it kicked in, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was a placebo. All I know is that it seemed to help me. I was never able to write for 12 straight hours. No way.
Right.
This was the first time that happened. So again, it's kind of an open question, but I would advise people, if you ever want to try any of these things like the bacapa, the ginkgo, the phosphatidylserine, that type of thing, you got to give it some time before you, and you probably would be a good idea to try one at a time rather than a bunch of them at once. Because again, if you take a bunch of them at once, how do you know which one's really working and which one isn't? So you want to give each one a trial. I would say to give it at least 6 weeks for each supplement to see if it helps your let's say, cognitive ability, your focus, your concentration, that type of thing. And that's about the best way to do it.
People tend to be too impatient with supplements. They'll take something for a week and go, I'm not feeling anything. It's like, think about that time frame in any other context. I worked out for a week. I didn't lose any weight or get stronger. It's not working. Well, you don't measure the effectiveness of a workout until you don't measure the effectiveness of a workout until you've done it for at least a month or so. Right. That's how long it takes to assess whether it's working or not.
But on the flip side of it, a lot of these products, they tout that it's going to work just like this, and by this time you're going to feel this and you're going to feel that.
That's true.
So that's the reason why a lot of people bought the product in the first place, because of all the promises that it gave. You can feel it up to, or at least by. That's the part they end up ignoring when they say that. Up to 30, within 30 days or more. See, they always forget the or more part. They heard 30 days, like, oh, there you go. I got a month. And then a month later, nothing's happening. Like, now we moved on to the or more part of the sentence.
Yeah, just think about what happens in a month for the most part. Really nothing for most people.
Except bills.
You work out for a month.
Bills is the only thing that happens every month.
Yeah, those are consistent. But you work out for a month, you're going to have some progress, but it's not going to be overwhelming. Even whether you're a skilled athlete or a newbie, you're not going to have this big time transformation. You're not going to add 100 pounds to your deadlift in a month. You're not going to have this magical transfer. It's consistency over long periods of time.
Well, another a kind of parallel to this is in the last 2-3 years, I've seen a couple of articles in medical journals where doctors are telling people not to take vitamin and mineral pills, so that they do absolutely nothing, and they're a complete waste of money. So the option they tell people is to eat a balanced diet. Now, my response to that is, first of all, if you eat a truly I wrote an article years ago where dietitians used a computer program to design perfectly balanced diets that would include every nutrient. They could not come up with such a diet. Certain nutrients you just can't get in the now this is the recommended amount, not mega doses. Certain nutrients you just can't get enough of from food. For example, vitamin D, vitamin E. These are two of them, just to name two off the top. So my response to those reports is, okay, if people, and besides which, when I used to give nutrition seminars, my first question to the audience was, how many here consume a balanced diet? When I'd say that, about, let's say there were 30 people in the room, about 5 hands would go up. Then my second question was, okay, how many of you people that eat a balanced diet every day eat foods from all the recommended food groups, including a minimal 5 servings a day of fruits and vegetables and dairy products, cheese, milk? No hands went up. So the people that thought they were following balanced diets were not. Therefore, they were lacking nutrients. So the point is, if you don't eat a balanced diet and you're not taking a vitamin mineral, buddy, lady, sooner or later, you're going to be in trouble. But now, how does this relate to what we're saying, Mike, and Sincere? You're not going to feel anything for a long time. Right. A lot of people have this idea, well, if I take this vitamin and mineral, I'm going to be able to run 10 miles and who knows, do a 400. It doesn't work like that. They work with coenzymes. It's a biochemical effect. They're not like antidepressant or stimulant. You're not going to feel it, but it is doing something.
Yeah, you're not going to feel the negatives of a deficiency for a long time either. I mean, I remember I stopped taking vitamin D. I just ran out, so I just stopped taking it for a long time. And I had some blood work done, and my vitamin D levels were crazy low, like ridiculously low. I didn't feel bad going in, though. Right. When I saw that number, I'm like, okay, get back on D3 because over time, this will be a problem.
Well, that's the thing. You see, the damage, if you want to call it that, is, I mean, you walk around, you will walk around feeling pretty normal, but there are things going on. For example, with vitamin D, there could be things going on related to cardiovascular problems, related to immune problems that you're not going to know about until something sudden crops up, and that's usually the case. So this notion that you don't need vitamins and minerals and a waste of money, it just sickens me to read that kind of stuff. It's so wrong to tell people that.
Yeah, and how much money is it really? It's not that expensive to have a good basic multivitamin. To take vitamin D3 supplementation is not expensive. None of these things are that expensive.
Yeah, and in the meantime, these same doctors and again, I'm not against doctors at all, believe me, but these same doctors that will tell a patient, don't take the vitamin mineral, have your balanced diet. As soon as a person shows maybe 5 points higher cholesterol level, here, take this statin drug, right?
Yeah, right.
You need a purple pill.
They don't hesitate to give them the drugs. But no, keep away from the vitamins. But this drug, this is what you need. I mean, what's going on there,
That vitamin has not been, researched or approved by the FDA because, but these drugs have, but and it's also been recalled by the FDA. What's the point, Doc?
Any pharmacist will tell you the pharmaceutical truism, a drug that has no side effects is a drug that doesn't work. That's a fact.
You can't even call it a drug at that point, if it doesn't have a side effect.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, getting back to the neutral, I would say that, again, give it a shot.
So with ginkgo biloba, you're recommending around 120 milligrams?
120. And let's say if you're a student that needs to cram and you have been taking this stuff for at least a month, you might want to go to 240 or a little bit more than that. I've used as much as I've gone up to 500 or 600. I haven't had any. The only problem there that could possibly happen is it interferes a little bit with blood clotting. So, if you're a hemophiliac, maybe you want to keep away from ginkgo, and you also want to keep away from garlic, which also does the same thing. Yeah. But, that's the way it is. I mean, give it a shot. And, see what happens. And it's not going to hurt you. These nutrients, again, have very low rate of side effects.
And out of vinpocetine, phosphatidylserine, bacopa, and ginkgo, would you recommend ginkgo as the first one to start with?
Actually, I would recommend bacopa, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Normally, I would recommend ginkgo, but there's been a problem with ginkgo. It has nothing to do with the ginkgo working or not. It's the fact that there's a situation going where there's a lot of fake ginkgo supplements. Some of these supplements do not contain what they call the ginkgolides, the active ingredients. Right. They're kind of like, unfortunately, Mike, and Sincere, I'm sure you're aware, there's a problem with it, with the food supplement industry. There's a couple of bad apples that ruin it for everybody, where they produce these inferior supplements that don't match the label. And when you're dealing with herbal substances, like, for example, ginkgo, it's a huge problem because, a lot of the herbal supplements, they're supposed to be standardized that contain a certain amount of active ingredient. Unfortunately, a large percentage are not. Why that happens, I really don't know. I don't know whether it's to make more money or whether it's
definitely to make more money.
Yeah, they're cutting corners, cutting costs.
I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt here, but you're probably right. But bacopa, for some reason, tends to be, because it's not quite as popular as ginkgo,
right?
It tends to be more correctly standardized. So bacopa would be my first choice. And I just actually saw about 2 or 3 recent studies. Bacopa has been used in something called Ayurvedic medicine, which is the medicine of India. It's been used for like 5,000 years as a memory enhancer. That doesn't mean it works, by the way. There's a lot of things. That's another mistake a lot of people make. Well, they've been using it for 5,000 years. It has to work.
Yeah, well, sacrificing people to the sun, too, for good weather 5,000 years ago as well.
Seriously.
That's a common argument that's often used for thousands of years. People in Nigeria have been using
that's the logic that was applied to certain pro-hormones that were released, that were used by African people, for hundreds of years as aphrodisiacs, supposedly. That was one of the main basis of releasing them as testosterone boosters, because the only actual studies to prove their efficacy were rat studies. There was not a single human study. But the people in Africa, in certain nations in Africa, swore by these. We use them as aphrodisiac. Since these people were human, obviously it must work. And that was the rationalization, right?
Right.
Now, I'm not even going to say whether they worked or not. Mike, you could read my article about it in Applied Metabolics. Suffice to say, some of them definitely have some potential. I'm not going to, do a broad generalization and say they all stink like some guys do. Right. I don't agree with that. I think one of them is actually quite useful. This stuff called long jack. It's also called Tongat Ali.
Yeah, that's a Malaysian herb, isn't it?
It's a Malaysian herb. Yeah. It comes from a tree. And again, the problem there, just like the other herbal stuff, is a lot of the stuff on the internet is fake. And, it doesn't do anything. But if you get the real stuff.
Yeah, LJ100 generally is a good standardized brand of that. Yeah. Right.
But let's say, if you can get the real stuff, and let's say you're a guy 45 who's starting to show low testosterone, what the studies show is that if you take this stuff, it's not going to give you a super physiological level like steroids or testosterone itself. Forget it. It's not, because I'll give you a blanket statement here. There's no supplement that works like steroids. Anyone who says it's just not telling the truth.
Right.
But it can bring up a low testosterone into a normal range. And again, it's completely free of side effects. And there's been about 3 recent studies since I wrote the article that have confirmed this. So again, it's situational. If you give it to a 25-year-old guy who already has a peak testosterone level, it's not going to do anything. You're wasting your money unless, and this is what I pointed out in my article, if you're a 25-year-old guy and you're doing something that will artificially lower your testosterone, let's say you're going without sleep, one night of lack of enough sleep in a 19-year-old guy, they showed in a study, will lower testosterone. Just one night of not enough sleep will lower testosterone 15%. If you're under a lot of stress, if you're not eating enough dietary fat, you have to have 20 to 25% fat in your diet to maintain your natural testosterone synthesis. If you're doing any of those, maybe taking Tongat Ali might, even in a 20-year-old, might give you a little bit of boost. You know what I mean? Saying, I'm not, but you still need to correct those other factors. Don't get me wrong. But I'm saying, again, it can work in certain situations, even for younger people. But generally, I'd say it's reserved for people or men, I should say, that are already showing, or women can use it too, because, older women, a lot of them do show low testosterone. They could use it for a little bit of a boost.
Well, cortisol is such an inhibitor of optimal testosterone. So what about looking at optimizing testosterone a different way, looking at managing cortisol via herbs such as rhodiola, ashwagandha, etc.?
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Also, phosphatidylserine, which we mentioned as a cognitive enhancer, it's been shown in some studies to kind of inhibit ACTH, which of course stimulates the cortisol release from the adrenal glands. It seems to nobody really knows the exact mechanism, but it seems to cut your if you're using the right amount, which is about it's anywhere from 300 to 800 milligrams. It can reduce your cortisol output by about a third. Now, Mike, that you don't. One thing you don't want to do, and a lot of bodybuilders make this error. They think cortisol is this evil hormone that should be obliterated. Well, let me tell you something, guys. I don't know if they're still doing it, because I don't really go to the contest anymore, but years ago, a lot of the bodybuilders were using a drug called cytidrin or Oriometrin. Now, what this stuff does is it inhibits steroid synthesis at a level right at the beginning of where steroids are produced from cholesterol. But it inhibits all steroids. They were using it to inhibit estrogen and cortisol to make them more cut, right? But what they didn't realize, it also inhibits androgens like testosterone. But a lot of the guys, here we go again with that thinking, if one tablet is good, 4 is going to make me much better, much harder. Some of the guys used it. They knocked out their cortisol. What happened was they were in such joint pain, they were so sore that they couldn't even work out.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that cortisol is an anti-inflammatory.
That's what it
hormone.
is.
It's not a pro-inflammatory hormone.
It's one of your main anti-inflammatory, and yes, it can be catabolic in certain situations, But the thing is, a lot of people also don't realize is that cortisol at certain points actually stimulates fat mobilization. It can be called a fat burner under certain conditions. They did a study.
Yeah, isn't that during intermittent fasting, your cortisol levels go up? And
There you go, exactly. And also after a workout.
Right.
The funny thing is, they did a study where they measured hormone release in young men after resistant exercise, and they found only 2 hormones had any relation at all to promoting muscle hypertrophy. The hormones were growth hormone and, surprisingly, cortisol. Which blew the minds of people who read this on the web. That, whoa, the body, they were having this cognitive dissonance. Well, wait a minute, cortisol builds muscle. Oh no, they freaked out when they read that.
Well, generally, when someone wakes up and they have really low energy, they think, "Oh, my cortisol must be high. I'm stressed." It's like, no, it's really low.
Oh,
right. And then they have really high cortisol at night. They can't sleep at night. They have that adrenal fatigue syndrome. What about? With phosphatidylserine, I was interesting sideline about that is I remember when that was first popularized in Muscle Mag. What was it? It might have been Ironman magazine. They had that one phosphatidylserine supplement. So anyway, I tried that 800 milligrams because at that time they were saying take it before you work out, which is really bad advice, right? But it was going on that line of thinking that you have, okay, your stress is really high. Lower your stress, you'll get a better workout, and the exact opposite is the case. Yeah. So I would take a high dose of phosphatidylserine before training, and you would just be lethargic and tired going into that workout.
Right.
So the right time to take it would have been after the workout, and probably not even that high a dosage either.
Well, the reason that happened to you, Mike, I can tell you why, is because of high dosages of phosphatidylserine also affect those neurotransmitters we talked about earlier. Yeah. And in the case of high doses of phosphate, you didn't realize it. It's not your fault. I didn't know it at the time either. Quite honestly, I didn't know this till about 2 years ago. But when you take high doses of phosphatidylserine, you stimulate serotonin release in the brain.
Right.
If you know anything about serotonin,
get really relaxed now. Yeah.
It's calming chemical. In fact,
you want to go take a nap. You don't want to go work out.
Yeah. In fact, there was a theory years ago. L-tryptophan is the immediate precursor. L-tryptophan acid is the immediate precursor for serotonin. And there was a theory that if you have too much tryptophan in the blood while you're working out, it'll get into the brain, convert it to serotonin, and take away your workout drive. You want to just go lie down instead of training.
Right.
And the antidote was thought to be branched chain amino acids, because branched chain amino acids compete with tryptophan for uptake into the brain. So, this was a theory. Unfortunately, subsequent studies show the effect is not quite as strong as they thought it was. It's not that it's not real. In other words, tryptophan does turn into serotonin, but the effect in that situation with athletes and people that work out, not quite as potent as they originally. It was more of a theoretical scenario rather than a real world. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Now, one thing you say about vinpocetine is that it also blocks genes in muscles that cause muscle aging.
Yeah, it actually they found this study that I think you're talking about ginkgo, aren't you? Is that ginkgo?
Yeah, I took notes on one of your. I'm pretty sure it was under my notes for the lecture you gave. I think it was under vinpocetine, but it's possible I got it wrong.
Actually, it's
ginkgo. Okay.
Ginkgo blocks. I believe it's about either 150 or 200 genes that are related to muscle aging.
Okay.
And in animal, again, it's you have to really take animal studies with a grain of salt.
Sure.
To use a cliche, because it doesn't always pan out into humans, but there are certain things in animals that are duplicated in certain physiological processes, let's say, in animals like rats that are duplicating humans, and there's a good chance, let's put it that way, there's a good chance that what happens in the rat will also be duplicated in human physiology. And this is a situation with ginkgo. These particular genes also exist in human muscle. So again, it would be like a long-term effect. In other words, somebody listening to this who's 65 years old might kind of run out to the health food store or go online and buy ginkgo thinking, well, I'm going to take this bottle of ginkgo and turn my muscles back into a 19-year-old. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. What it does is it delays the aging process. It doesn't stop it. As to my knowledge, there's nothing that exists currently that stops the aging process. The best you can do is delay it.
Yeah.
Of course, exercise, good nutrition. There's several ways to do that. But to actually stop aging of muscles, no. They thought there was something that did that. It was called GDF11. This was a protein they discovered where they gave it to rats, and it actually rejuvenated the muscles. So the muscles of the equivalent of, let's say, 60-year-old humans, I'm talking about rats, turned into 19-year-old muscles. And this made all the headlines. They said, we finally found a substance that can turn back the clock on muscle aging. And I put the report on my Facebook page. And I didn't put a warning like I should have, but I didn't. Guess what? Now they know that GDF11 works exactly the opposite in humans as it does in rats. It speeds the aging of muscles. But it works. So, my God, the last thing you want to do is take an injection of GDF11. Yeah. So it just goes to show that's how funny science is. This is a beef I have with a lot of these blogs and sites where they write about rat studies, and the headline says, you should, study shows you need 40 grams of protein after every meal. And then you read the text, and it turns out it was a rat study.
Yeah.
There was no human verification of it.
Actually, a lot of the studies on protein requirements are based on animal models.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's why they're completely flawed, need to be updated.
See the way this guy is writing it, he's jumping to the conclusion that, well, it did this in the rat, so you can take this as absolute fact. That's bad thinking and bad science. Yeah. And yet people read this. I see this stuff reposted on Facebook. These people believe this crap.
Well, they just read the headline and they're like, oh gosh, yeah. They found something. They didn't read the actual article. And that's probably what that blogger did, was create that headline for clickbait. And so everybody's going to share it and it's going to go viral. But who actually read the freaking article and then went on to read the actual study itself? Most people don't anymore. Most people just see a headline and run with it, and then they have comments about it. I see on Facebook all the time, like, did you even read? What are you even saying right now? What kind of comment is this? If you read the article, you wouldn't have said what you just said in the comment section. So.
Well, I've learned kind of obliquely, I've learned to be careful. You ever see this stuff on Facebook where they'll post a sensationalistic item. Hillary Clinton found to have sex with Donald Trump, something
tell
like
the truth. Yeah, that's very sensational.
And and you look at it, and if you read the article, it almost seems it's real. And so, like in the past, I'd make the mistake of posting something like that, and then suddenly after I posted, I'd sit back and say, "Wait a minute, hold on a second, something's not right there."
Yeah, it's just clickbait.
Yeah,
there's a lot of that clickbait.
Or someone will say like, "Oh, that's just a myth, man." Somebody, you might want to take that article down.
That's what.
There's one I came across where it said 20 incredible transformations that famous actors, actresses have made right before and after, and the picture that you clicked on was this extremely overweight young black lady that's in this show called Empire, right?
Oh yeah.
And I was like, so I clicked on it because I was curious. I was like, oh wow, she lost a bunch of weight. She needs to lose a lot of weight. So I was curious to see if she maybe went through some transformation recently. Yeah, so I went through all 22 of these celebrities looking for her transformation, and she was nowhere to be found.
Still overweight.
I was like, just wasted my time.
All you have to do is watch the last week's Empire, Mike, and you'll realize like, nah.
Oh no, but I thought that might have been filmed like a couple of months ago. Maybe she made some transformation recently, but I mean, her photo was right there, so I was like, okay, I'm curious. But that's what they were betting on. They're like, going, okay, people are going to be curious enough or dumb enough in this case to click on it like me, and then see what this transformation is. And anyway, that's just an example of clickbait that is extremely common on the internet.
Well, I just did one of my latest articles in the next issue of my Applied Metabolics newsletter. I actually jumped on a news item I saw. They came out with a study where they tracked these Biggest Loser contestants, and they tracked 14 of them over a 6-year period, and they found that almost all of them were failures. So then I researched it more. I found other stories, and it turns out that about 97, 98% of the people that lost all their weight on that show, regained it all back and then some. Some of them got even fatter. You might remember Oprah.
Well, any goal you achieve in the context of a competition is going to be problematic, because what do you do when that competition environment's gone?
Exactly. When the thought of winning prize money or something else, or even just the fame itself is gone now, because that was your main objective instead of trying to get healthy. Or you're on a TV show where your job is to work out, right? That's all you're doing. You're taken out of your life. You're not working and then doing these workouts. You're just doing those workouts. Yeah, you're protected from all the things that can make you fail. You're stuck in this house. You've got your own physicians. You got your own nutritionists. You got all this stuff, so here's the thing. If you don't win that money where you can afford to buy these people once you get back into the real world, then you're right back where you started with, to the things that got you on that show in the first place.
But what I don't get is this, okay? You've reached a level of fitness. And a lot of those transformations, to be honest, are really impressive that you see on the show. I don't watch the show. I don't like the show, but I've seen the transformations. Now, for a small window of time, you are strong and fit. Yeah. Why don't you want to hold on to that feeling?
Right.
Because that to me is the biggest motivation of being strong and fit, is that you like the way you look and feel. It makes it easy to avoid all of those negative habits.
So it's like, not only did you lose the weight, did you also lose your memory? Did you remember how bad you felt before you got there, how miserable you were, how life sucked? Why would you want to go back to that?
Well, the thing is, here's the thing. The reason I wrote the article is because in all the articles I read about this study, and there's been dozens of them all over the internet commenting on it. And by the way, I never watched the show either, Mike. I'm not into reality programs.
It's horrible. These shows are terrible.
Oh, I hate them. I hated them all. Anyway, the point is, though, that I researched, I went all over the internet reading articles, but there was not one single article I read or I encountered that gave a solution to these people. In other words, the way these articles are written, a lot of them ended by saying, so there you go, forget about dieting. Just accept it. We're just accept being fat, because it's not, you're never going to look at these people.
That mentality I hate too, that you can't make yourself better, whatever the context is.
Accept the fact that if you're extremely obese, you're going to get heart disease. You just got to accept. That really pissed me off when I read that, because that's taking away any chance of hope for these people, and it's fucking not true. That's what really pissed me off. Right. It's not true. Yes, it's difficult. I'm not going to say it's easy. So what I did is I wrote an article. I talked the beginning. I talked about these studies. All the science studies related to the Biggest Loser. I talked about some of the horror stories that these people went through with that idiot Jillian Michaels, who I'd like to punch in the face, and this type of stuff. But the thing is, the context, the point of the article was I laid out a way where these people could have kept the weight off and stayed fit. In fact, my research showed me there's a small percentage of people that did just that. What they did is they continued to do things right. And in some cases, like in the study I just mentioned, the 14 people, only 2 of them kept the weight off. One of them underwent bariatric surgery. He had a stomach staple, whatever. I discount that. That to me is a whole different ballgame.
Sure.
But in other words, there are ways, and I in this article I talk about some of the ways. And this isn't just for like Biggest Losers contestant. This is for people that experience the recidivism situation of dieting. Where you lose a lot of weight and it always comes back. 97% of people that lose a lot of body fat regain it. Why? Well, the reasons are very complex. I have to say that for another article, and very, very complex reasons. But I gave a practical information article about, basically, if you're a Biggest Loser or whatever, here's a way to keep it off. It's going to take a little work, and I'm not going to say it's easy. It's going to take some willpower, some discipline. But I gave some ways to make it easier where, because it does take, you mentioned earlier the competition, you guys. I totally agree with you because I could relate to that because when I competed in physique contests years ago, I got to tell you, I had this thing in my head, even when there was a no contest imminent, I would never let myself get fat. Never. In other words, in those days, we used to do something called bulking up, where we eat a lot of food and purposely gain weight to try and get size. I'm talking about the guys that didn't take drugs. That was our way of gaining size. We eat a lot of food in between contests to try and put muscle bulk. Then we trim down, hopefully, some of the bulk we gained, the added strength we got from all that excess body fat. Mm-hmm. We keep some of the muscle that we gained by being stronger. That was the thought behind it, see? Now, but what I did is I would kind of never let myself get to the point of being obese. I got bulky, I got smooth, but when I saw no trace of abdominals, in other words, if it got to the point where the obliques were like sitting over my belt,
that's a bad sign.
Yeah,
when you can't see your Johnson anymore, you've bulked up a little bit too much.
Hold on a second. It never got to that point. But wait a minute. You guys heard of Frank Zane, right?
Yeah, sure.
Frank Zane told me a story years ago. Frank Zane is a 3-time Mr. Olympia. Yeah. His competition body weight was maybe 185 tops, right? It's a very small bone man, 5'9". He tried for a while. When Arnold came on the scene, he looked at Arnold. He said, "Hey, wait a minute. If I'm going to compete against this guy, I have to get bigger." So, he was living in Florida at the time. He decided to do heavy squats, all the heavy lifting. He increased his food intake. He went up to 205 pounds. And I remember him telling the story. He says, "Jerry," he says, "I remember I was driving my car. I stopped at a light, and I suddenly realized that my stomach was hanging over the steering wheel." Now, this is Frank Zane talking.
Yeah, that guy is shredded.
Yeah. He's shredded, and I couldn't even picture something like that.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine.
And what he said to me, he says, "I never let myself get fat again. And I accepted the fact that I cannot really be a big guy, so I'm going to go in the other direction. Right. I'm going to make myself as hard and cut and finished as possible." So that in other words, my point being that when you're competing, there's a thing in your mind where I can't let myself go. Where without that competition edge in your mind, it's easy. I'll have that fucking donut. Who cares? I don't have to show my head. So, and I'm not saying that I'm in that situation.
Well, just the other day, like yesterday, I was doing sprints, right? And I did 14 50-yard sprints, just having a great workout. And there's a nice guy there, nice older guy was walking his golden retriever, and he was just curious what I'm doing because he's seen me out there many times. He's like, "Oh, you have a competition coming up, or you're going to be in a sprinting competition, or you play football?" And I was like, "No, I just do this to work out. I just like to be fit." And he just couldn't understand that response because to him, he's like, "Why would you be out here working out this hard without some monetary reason?"
Because just being generally healthy is not compelling enough,
No, but that's the American mindset. If it's always a competitive thing, right? So in other words, doing it for the sake of doing it because you enjoy it. That's a concept that a lot of people can't get.
Or in their mind, they're thinking, like, how can you enjoy that? It looks painful. Like, wow.
Yeah, that's what he said. He goes, "Oh man, you're a glutton for punishment." And I didn't want to be rude, but I was looking at his gut and I was like, "You're just a glutton, buddy."
You know what the funny thing about that is? there's an old saying, once you're a bodybuilder, you're always a bodybuilder. I haven't competed in, God knows, since the 70s, but I cannot help but go in the gym and train hard. It's in my genes. Right. When I go out, I go all out. If you looked at me, it looks like I'm training for a contest. I don't talk. I don't play on cell phones. I train like a competitor. And every so often, people in the gym, this isn't people on the street, people in the gym would come up to me and say that same, hey, Jerry, are you training for some sort of a master's contest? And I said, my answer is always the same. I have absolutely no interest in competition. I said, I just enjoy training like this. I don't like staying in the gym for 10 hours. I like to train hard, train intensely, get the hell out. That's my philosophy. I don't like to sit around and talk. I'm not here to play apps on my cell phone. But these people can't seem to understand that. They think that's either one way or the other. Either you're just, fooling around or whatever. I mean, they just can't understand why somebody
just working hard. People often assume, okay, you must be making a lot of money doing this, or you think you're going to make a lot lot of money doing this. That doesn't even cross their mind that you may actually enjoy doing this.
Or something like that,
Right. That's true.
The act of doing something and really immersing yourself into it because you fully enjoy it. That's a hard concept for a lot of people to get in our culture.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I have another motivation which is, this has been my motivation for, let's say, the last 20 years, is the health motivation.
Right.
It's like, the studies on exercise are just every day. There's another one talking about related to longevity, disease prevention, all that stuff. I happen to have bad genetics for cardiovascular disease and diabetics. In fact, even now I'm pre-diabetic. In other words, every so often, if I eat a lot of carbs or whatever, my blood sugar goes above normal.
Do you take anything for insulin sensitivity? That's a good segue. Different herbs or anything like that?
I do take the drug Metformin.
Metformin has a lot of anti-aging benefits.
In fact, just as a tangential statement, my research on Metformin, I would take Metformin even if I had no insulin insensitivity.
Yeah, the benefits are tremendous. Have you found that that actually helps get your blood sugar into an optimal range?
Yes, without question.
At what dosage, Jerry? 500 milligrams?
I've been taking the same dosage for the past 15 years, which is 500 milligrams twice a day. And there's no particular reason why. I guess that you can say the reason is I don't really have an out of control blood glucose problem. Yeah. The highest that it ever gets, if I really, really eat badly, which is very rare. I mean, I don't go to those buffets anymore, all you can eat. But when I did, let's say I did, the next morning when I check my blood glucose, I do it on a resting blood glucose. Sometimes it'll go to 115. Now, diabetes is 126.
Right.
Have a resting blood glucose of 100 or more, you are considered insulin insensitive.
Right.
There's a lot of mistakes made about blood glucose because if you go to almost any doctor and your blood glucose is under 100, he will say, you're fine.
Right. You could be 98, 99. They'll say you're fine.
You're fine.
Yeah. And really, you want to be around 80, right?
Right. Yeah. And if he will look, he will confirm that by looking at a test called glycosylated hemoglobin.
Right.
It's a measure of long-term glucose control. But here's the point. What you just said, Mike, is very accurate. The optimal glucose, which is where a lot of doctors just don't seem to realize that, is not in the 90s. It's the 80s. It's the low to mid 80s. 80 to 85 is optimal. As soon as you get into the 90s, you're getting a glycosylation effect, meaning there's a incorporation of excess glucose into protein structures throughout your body. This is not only causing accelerated aging, it's causing damage to arteries. There's a subtle damage going on.
Right.
That's very bad. So you want to keep your blood glucose to 80 to 85. But now this is going to kind of shock you guys, and it's going to be a little bit depressing. If you're on a high protein diet and you have a lot of muscle, it's going to be very difficult to keep that blood glucose in that range. In fact, the only way—
Is that because of gluconeogenesis with the protein?
Gluconeogenesis, and also because of the protein itself, and also because of the way muscles use glucose.
I don't do super high protein, so that I'm not worried.
Right. Well,
I do moderate, so I'm good. Well, I've always been fairly conservative when it comes to protein. 1 gram, like Franco Columbu always told me, 1 gram per kilo plus 20, 30 grams when you're working out hard. I was like, well, shit, if that worked for you guys, man, then what am I doing taking more?
Well, they're actually showing that, believe it or not, branched chain amino acids, which are probably, they call them the muscle amino acids, the most popular amino. If you're already overweight, they actually increase insulin insensitivity.
Yeah, I was reading that too.
Overweight, obese people have higher levels of branched chain amino acids than lean people, right? Now, the thing is, the only way a guy with a lot of muscle who's eating a very high protein, much more protein than you just mentioned, but when I say high protein, I'm talking about, the 300-gram guys.
Yeah. No danger of that for me anyway.
Right. Only way they're going to get their blood glucose in that optimal range of 80 to 85, the only way is to have a carbohydrate intake of 50 grams or less a day. That's it.
Well, this puts an interesting argument into the whole low carb phenomenon, because low carb is always going to be higher protein, right?
Right.
So even with a high protein, high fat diet, you're still going to have potentially high glucose levels if the protein's too high.
That's very true. As a matter of fact, the ketogenic diet, of course, is 20 grams of carbohydrate or less. A lot of people don't realize that if you consume a high protein diet with a ketogenic diet, you're not going to get into ketosis, because what's happening is
all the glucose from the protein being converted.
The complete lack of carbohydrate is stimulating gluconeogenesis in the liver, converting some of those glucose converting amino acids into glucose. So that's going to block your ketogenesis. So to do a true ketogenic diet, you have to have a lowish to moderate protein intake. Believe it or not, I said in one article, you probably don't want to eat more than the suggested amount of protein for the average person, which is 0.8 grams per kilogram. And that's low.
Yeah.
That's 70, 80 grams a day.
Right.
Most bodybuilders would recoil in horror.
They have that per meal.
Exactly. They have that per meal. But hey, buddy, you're not going to get, if you think you're going to have have a ketogenic effect with your 200, 300 grams of protein, you're in dreamland, pal. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and there's only so much fat you can eat, man. I mean, well, what else? You're eating a lot of animal protein generally if you're on a ketogenic diet, and then what are you going to do? You're just going to take cups worth of MCT oil.
Yeah,
you'll be living on the toilet.
But now this is going to seem kind of like paradoxical, but you might say to me at this point, now wait a minute. If a lot of the protein can be converted into glucose, doesn't this mean that the more protein you eat, the higher your glucose level will be? The answer to that is no, because the early studies about the conversion of protein into glucose, it turns out, were wrong. They were based on faulty methodology. I myself have been guilty of, and I admit it, nolo contendere, I'm pleading. I have written articles where I said 57%, I'm sorry, about, what was it? I think I said it was about 57% of ingested protein is converted into glucose through glucose. That was completely wrong. It turns out more recent studies show only a very small percentage of protein is turned in, much less than they thought. And even if you do take in a large amount of protein, you're not going to get a big spike in blood glucose. The reason why has to do with the fact that when you eat protein, yes, you're stimulating. Oh, I'm sorry, it has to do with insulin. A lot of the anti-carb people talk about, hey, buddy, Mr. Protein, you Mr. Low Carb. You don't realize when you take in a lot of protein, some of those protein, like leucine, you're stimulating insulin, stupid. So what are you talking about carbs and insulin? Yeah, but they're overlooking one fact when they say that. When you take in protein, yes, some of the amino acids like leucine are stimulating insulin, but you're also stimulating another hormone from the pancreas called glucagon. Right. Glucagon offsets the insulin effect. So the net effect is nothing, very little effect on insulin with protein. Otherwise, think about it, guys. That would mean that if a protein really did stimulate massive amounts of insulin, like these critics say, every guy or every person following a high protein diet would be as fat as a house. They'd look like those guys on the Biggest Loser before. We'd all look like that. So it's inherently wrong to say that.
Now, why does it increase glucose though? Because now I'm confused. Because one end we just said that too much protein is going to increase glucose because of protein neogen. Okay. So there's a distinction.
I'm talking about. I actually confused the word insulin. A protein does stimulate insulin, and shockingly, certain amino acids stimulate as much insulin as eating white sugar.
Right.
But it's not the same effect as white sugar because of the glucagon effect. Glucagon tempers the insulin effect. Right. So without the insulin stimulation of lipogenesis, you're not, and again, there's a lot of, just like we were talking about cortisol, there's a lot of mistakes made about insulin. The notion that insulin itself will make you fat is just not correct. It's not correct. In other words, you have to have excess calories coupled with insulin.
Right.
Or, in other words, whether it's some carbohydrates or whatever, you have to have excess calories. But here we go again with the paradoxical stuff. This stuff can drive you crazy, by the way. Don't try and think too deeply into this stuff. So if I do, I start to have to take some theanine to.
Well, just backtracking a little bit to metformin. The only negative thing that I came across in researching metformin is that I forget the exact context, but there was something about it lowered androgen receptor uptake or had some negative impact on testosterone. Can you clarify anything about that? Okay.
Some studies, that's correct. In fact, honestly, that's one of the reasons why I've stuck to taking only, I've tempted to go to 1,500, especially when my blood sugar gets out of control, but I've stuck to taking 1,000, 500 twice a day because some studies show that it does interfere with testosterone. Let's say, probably at the level of the androgen receptor, it does have some sort of effect. But here's the small print, Mike. That effect begins at a dose of 2,000 milligrams and up.
Okay, so it'd have to be pretty high.
You'd have to be high.
It's just 500 twice. You do 500 twice a day. That's what two of your biggest meals.
Right, and that does not affect testosterone. Even 1,500 won't affect. As soon as you go to 2,000, a certain number, not all, but a certain number of individuals. Again, I think a lot of that depends.
Yeah, but they keep discovering more benefents in metformin too. It helps a lot of women with avoiding breast cancer. It just goes on and on and on.
Well, it has to do. I'm going to write an article on this, but just to put it briefly, it has to do with this other protein called mammalian target of rapamycin, Mtor for short.
Right.
But all of us who are engaged in resistant exercise, when we take in amino acids to gain muscle size, what we're doing is we're taking the amino acids to stimulate this protein called Mtor. Mtor, once it's turned on, initiates a biochemical or enzymatic cascade that results in increased muscle protein synthesis, which in turn leads to muscular hypertrophy, right? So if you want to gain muscle, you definitely want to stimulate Mtor, and you want to keep away from things that block Mtor. What's the thing that blocks Mtor? Another protein called ampk. How does metformin work? One of the things it does, they just discovered the main mechanism. It actually uncouples ATP production at the level of the mitochondria. In other words, it works almost like, DNP.
Yeah, sure.
But it's nothing like that. I mean, it's not going to cause the effects of, but I mean, in a way, it's kind of similar because it interferes with energy production at its most basic level. As a consequence, because of this, you wind up burning more fat, this and that, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, AMPK is also stimulated by metformin. They used to think that was the main mechanism. It's the secondary mechanism. But this stimulation of AMPK is what imparts to metformin all of its health benefits because it puts a brake on Mtor. Because Mtor not only does it stimulates protein synthesis, but it does it in a shotgun manner. It stimulates tumor spread, metastasis. It also stimulates the aging of cells. It does a lot of bad things when it gets out of balance. And as you get older, there's an imbalance between AMPK and Mtor, where Mtor starts to dominate over AMPK. AMPK drops. then with the elevated mTOR, you have an increased risk of many degenerative diseases, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, cancer. So the thought is, if you could take something like metformin in a safe dosage to balance, to bring up your AMPK, you will balance the mTOR. But if you take the metformin strategically, in other words, it will not, and this is a key point, it will not interfere with the mTOR stimulus. In other words, it's not going to mess up your gains, and it's not going to mess up your muscle protein synthesis if you take it strategically. In other words, don't take it, for example, right after a workout. You don't want to take metformin then, because it'll kick out the AMPK and it might interfere with the mTOR effect that from the amino acids you might have ingested, right? In fact, what was I was going to say again?
So maybe with dinner then, if assuming you don't work out around that time frame, breakfast, et cetera.
Exactly.
Meals that are away from the workouts.
Right. It's almost comparable to an article I wrote about concurrent training. That's doing your aerobics after your, with your weight training or in the same workout. I pointed out in the article that, if you separate the workouts by 3 to 6 hours, in other words, if you do your weight training and do your aerobics 3 to 6 hours either before or after, there's no interference whatsoever. None. Zero. In other words, also, if the newest studies show, and this is shocking, they used to think that aerobics, by the way, aerobics is a good way to stimulate AMPK. That's one of the benefits of aerobics, because when you do aerobics, you kind of rapidly lower your energy stores. And as soon as your ATP level in muscle drops, the signal is sent out and AMPK rises in order to allow your muscles to burn fat, right? But it turns out that I lost my train of thought. I have so many things in my mind. See, this is a time when you need the modafinil. So many things they're bumping into each other. But the point is that this study showed that doing aerobics right after the workout, this kind of even shocked me. In fact, it was so shocking. I had already written an article on concurrent training in my applied metabolic. I had to write an update because of this one study. It was like shocking to me. They found that doing aerobics right after the workout stimulated mTOR. All the textbooks say just the opposite. Yeah. Aerobics block mTOR because of the AMPK, but it stimulated mTOR.
So for some reason, if done after strength training, it's different.
Right. So, but as I point in the article, if for some reason you do find that, I still believe, this is my personal bias, when I train my legs, I don't do aerobics afterwards.
Yeah.
Just for the benefit of the doubt, for two reasons. Just in case it turns out there is an interference. And the second reason is a very more pragmatic reason. My legs are dead.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, you have to save that energy to walk out to the car.
Let me tell you, if you can do an aerobics workout after training legs, you haven't trained your legs.
Exactly. After I do squats, I don't generally want to do anything.
Exactly. I just want to limp to the car.
Hey, listen, I remember training. Arnold Schwarzenegger had a tough time training legs. He hated training legs so badly that he used to grab anyone in the original Gold Gym. Hey, train legs with me. Guys who didn't even know. Train leg. He just needed somebody to push him, right?
Right.
After he would do legs, and he trained legs alone with no other muscle because he couldn't do anything after legs. After legs, Arnold, I don't think they ever photographed this, he'd have to lie on his back for 20 minutes. He couldn't move. He actually couldn't even walk around the gym, right? I mean, that's training legs.
Yeah.
Right.
So
that's no joke. Well, hey, man, we don't want to keep you on all day. We're definitely going to get you back because we only touched on a few subjects that we wanted to get to. So we'll get you back again if you're available. But
especially that green tea discussion too.
Yeah, that's an interesting one for sure. But people can, if people enjoyed this conversation, which I'm sure you did, check out Applied. What's your website again, Jerry? I thought I had it right in front of me here.
Son of a bitch, I can't remember. No, I'm only
yeah, that's what I was saying. I was like, I thought I wrote it down.
This is what happens when you don't take modafinil. No, it's www.appliedmetabolics.com, and like I say, I call it a newsletter, which is kind of a misnomer because, as you said, Mike, it's like 40 to 50 pages a month.
Yeah, it's more like an encyclopedia.
It's all solid research. There's no bullshit. There's no ads. I'm not trying to sell anybody anything other than the education. And I cover everything. I mean, I cover hormonal therapy, nutrition, supplements, ergogenic aids, exercise science, I have a couple of women subscribers. I'm trying to do stuff for them too. So it's basically, it's all written in plain English. I'm not trying to impress people by using terms like p-values, like some of these guys do to show you how smart they. That's a bunch of crap. They put in these graphs. I can't even understand the graphs they put. They're just trying to tell you how smart they are. I'm not impressed, and I don't think any intelligent person is. I'm trying to impart information that people can understand and use practically. That's my goal.
Right. Now, Applied Metabolics is great. I'm a subscriber, and I subscribed maybe a couple of weeks ago, and it was, I think I spent 4 hours the first night looking through information you had on there, because it's just vast and deep. So it's definitely something I encourage people to check out. It's only $10 a month.
Right.
So, I mean, give it a shot for a month or two just to test the waters, and most likely you're going to want to stick with it.
You can test the water, and if you subscribe, you can look. You have access to the online archive, which is all my previous articles of almost 2 years now.
Yeah.
But I want, that I always want people, do it in bits and pieces, because that's a hell of a lot of reading, if I say so myself. I mean,
and make sure you allocate some time to devote to it, because you're not going to go on there for a few minutes and then leave. You're going to be stuck on there because it's a lot of intriguing information.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, for the short attention span, a couple of people gave me suggestions. They said, why don't you put a summary? Like a one-box summary of each article. So like 2 or 3 issues ago, I started doing that. At the end of each article, I have like a 1 or 2 paragraph summary of the main points of the entire article. So if you want to know just the main points and you're in a big hurry, you could read that in about, 20 seconds?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good addition.
Yeah. So.
Well, great, man. Great having you on. Definitely check out appliedmetabolics.com. And we'll look forward to having you back again. You also have a great YouTube channel as well.
Yeah. I appreciate it. It was great talking to you guys. You're both great guys. Really enjoyed this discussion.
Thanks a lot, Jerry. Appreciate it, man. Yeah, I'd love to have you back soon.
Okay.
All right, you take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, folks. I'm all talked out. So at this point, use that coupon code LLA. Go to MikeMahler.com. Go buy a crap load of products. Go invest yourself in some educational products too. Or you can go fuck yourself. How about that? Just want to give you some options just in case. You can support the show.
There's always that.
You can either support the show or you can go fuck yourself. I mean, if you don't feel like supporting the show, that is another option. And how about with you, man?
Same thing, man. Go to newwarriortrain.com. Do the same thing. Use that coupon code LLA. And also head over to patreon.com/LLA podcast. Support us that way as well. And last but not least, go wherever you listen to this podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, rate us, review us. And just say like, hey, I'm not going to fuck myself. I'm going to leave this review. So it's a lot less painful.
I'm fed up of not seeing new reviews, too. We've got thousands of people every episode, and we're stuck at like 197 for like perpetuity on iTunes. Somebody go over there and leave a review. Let's get to 200. It just irritates me to know
right now.
3 away. We're 3 away from 200, and the ticker's not moving. And I know people are listening to the show because I see the stats every week. All right? I know we have more than 3 people listening to each episode. So 3 of you go over there and leave a review on iTunes, and then Stitcher, same thing.
Look, man, you don't get to almost 1 million downloads with no one listening to your show. Okay, so come on, man. 1 million downloads and 197 reviews. Let's fix that. That math doesn't add up.
I mean, it's the least you can do, especially for those of you that have never supported us at all. You've never donated anything. You've never bought a product from either one of us. You're just listening to each episode month after month, year after year, soaking in all the great info. The least you can do is go leave that review on iTunes and Stitcher.
Hey, man. Karma's good. Especially when it's good karma. We give you good information. Give us a good review. All right. So anyway, folks, that's going to wrap it up for this week. Until the next time around. We'll catch everybody next time. Take care.
All right. Take care, everyone.